Sure, sir. We are good to go. Just waiting for Aditi to start the session. Aditi, you may start it as and when convenient.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. Yeah. All well, yeah. So I am the director of the Kerala Museum in Cochin. And I'd like to welcome you all to this third session of All That's Kerala, which has been the brainchild of and we've covered some very interesting topics so far, and I'm looking forward to today's session. It's been a very interesting journey of exploring what and how we look today. From the History Museum, where the founder actually envisioned teaching history in a fun way to school children, to today where we are doing Zoom webinars left, right and center to discuss the current status of our existence, the way we live today with COVID times, and you know how people are making meaning of this time. And today's talk is going to be very interesting, I think, on the Kerala that we don't know. I'm hoping to see what is going to be revealed tonight. Mr. MP Joseph, over to you for tonight's session.
Thank you very much, Aditi. Thanks also to Mohit, and a big thanks to Ambassador T P Sreenivasan for being a guest tonight. This program is really meant to introduce Kerala, particularly the little known or the unknown aspects of Kerala, to the country and to the world. And as always, it will be an interactive session. You can ask your questions and write out your remarks and your suggestions and put them in the chat box or the question box anytime. And I will request Dr. Sreenivasan to address them during the course of this conversation. And of course, there will, if time permits, be a proper question and answer session at the end of the program. But I request you to keep your questions short and sweet and as pointed as possible. But please feel free to ask your questions anytime. This is the third session, as Aditi said. Our first and second sessions were quite a big, how do I call it, a hit. We had Dr. K.N. Raghavan talking about cricket, curries and cardamom in the first session, and we had Alphonse, KG Alphonse, former minister, talking of Munnar and the mountains in the second session. And today we have former ambassador and permanent representative of India to the UN, Dr. T P Sreenivasan, who is also the governor for India to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. He's an educationist, he's an author, he's a writer, he is a columnist, he's a speaker. I could go on for a long time. He belongs, as most of you know, to the Indian Foreign Service, the 67 batch. And after his retirement in 2004, he's become much more active than before. His Videsha Vijaya program, which roughly translated is Thoughts on International Affairs, is a program that's been running on Asianet News, India's Kerala's prime news channel, for the last 15 years or so. I think it's the longest running program in a Malayalam TV now. So that's what Ambassador Sreenivasan is. Thank you, sir, for being on the show tonight. Let me just introduce Ambassador Sreenivasan as somebody who was born in Kerala, in Kayamkulam, which is central Kerala, and studied in Trivandrum. And then he left Kerala for like 40 years. He was in the Indian Foreign Service. He used to come back occasionally for holidays. But then he came back after 40 years, and he's been in Kerala since 2004. So who would be better to talk about Kerala, I thought, than somebody who was born here, brought up here, and then went away for 40 years. Such a person would know Kerala. But such a person would also not know Kerala because he has been away for so long. So when I requested Ambassador Sreenivasan that he should talk about the Kerala he knew, he said he would talk about the Kerala he does not know. He said that his actions from Kerala for that long 4 decades has left a wide gap in his understanding of Kerala. So the first puzzle I had to unravel is how would anyone talk about a thing he did not know about? Dr. Sreenivasan says he'd talk about Kerala which he does not know about. That puzzled me. You can talk about things you know, not about things that you don't know. And that was when I knew that Ambassador Sreenivasan was pulling my leg. Dr. Sreenivasan knows all about Kerala. Everything that is needed to know about Kerala, he knows it as the palm of his hand. So welcome, sir, to the conversation. Let me start by asking you, what is it about Kerala that you do not know, Ambassador?
Well, I explained to you the motivation for me to choose a subject like this because I have a 40-year gap in my understanding of Kerala. Whenever I want to stand up and talk about Kerala, anything, politics, education, culture, everything, I realize how much I don't know because of these 40 years. And these 40 years are not the current 40 years of international information and the internet and the flow of information, etc. And those were literally away from home. And whenever I try to catch up with something, I always find that there is a huge gap. And also because before I left, I was in a cocoon. I was a student most of the time, focusing simply on studies, not looking at around the world around me, politics least of all. And then a year in college when I was teaching, again, very protected kind of environment. And I was not thrown into the milieu of Kerala life before I left. So when I came back, the Kerala I found was new in very many ways. And this is what astonished me. And I've been trying to catch up with that knowledge. So in that process, I discovered many things remain undiscovered. But you are a person who has lived here, who has been in the government of Kerala. So I thought an exchange of views between somebody who has these gaps and somebody who has the direct first-hand knowledge of everything in Kerala would be an interesting subject. That is the only reason why I started this. And the first question that haunted me when I came back is, why is it called God's own country? People just keep on repeating, oh, welcome to the God's own country, we are so, and nobody has ever asked, why do you call yourself a God's own country? Which I asked, and I never use this in my own speeches. I never say God's own country because I haven't understood it. Of course, there are many, many theories. It is basically a tourism slogan, as I understand it. Oh, beautiful country, God's own country. I believe it was invented by the New Zealanders, not by us. And somebody simply copied it from the New Zealand literature, tourist literature. But there is more meaning to that being attributed to that. For example, Paramesh, one of the incarnations of Vishnu, Parasurama, threw his axe into the sea, and Kerala was formed because of that. So God's own country, created by God himself. Of course, there's a story behind it. I'm not going to go into that. And the other thing is that this is one
You
place.
answered your own question now.
Sorry? Sorry?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
I was going to say that you have answered your own question. It was Parashuram who threw the axe, and
Yes,
that's why we call it God's own country. And I've got two sources for it. My batchmate Jay Kumar was tourism secretary, and he claims credit for it, as well as one of my shishyas, Amitabh Khan, who is CEO of Niti Aayog. He was, I think, tourism director. And I believe he also had something to contribute to the name. But of course, it is God's own country. And speaking of the gods, are there too many gods in Kerala? Are there too many rituals and religious places and too much
yes.
of...
Yes, that's what I discovered when I came
What do you
back.
think, having been...
There is an explosion of faith in Kerala. All these huge temples and churches and mosques that you see around were not there. And even the rituals were not there. The Attukal, the festival, which is famous all around the world, thousands and lakhs of people come to Trivandrum to it. Nobody ever thought of that for that particular temple. And where you have bigger temples, bigger churches, and therefore maybe somebody who comes to Kerala might think, oh, this is God's own country. But my theory is that this is none of these. This is basically we are escaping our responsibility. God's own country, let God take care of it. That is the attitude that I see. In fact, somebody asked me to write about the Trivandrum golf course. So I said, this is God's own golf course because nobody cuts the grass, nobody cleans the place. But when the rain comes, it gets cleaned up. When the summer comes, it gets warmed up, and then you are able to play without doing anything by human hands. So similarly, I thought that there was a little bit of an escapism here. That is, you don't have to work very hard. After all, this belongs to God. God help us, and God will help. And that attitude has got into the minds of Keralites. I don't know whether you agree with that or not.
In a sense, yes. For example, I used to say always, and it comes back to me when you speak about, being laid back, is that you see, Kerala, I believe the word comes from the Kera Vriksha, the coconut tree. Now, the coconut tree is one tree where you plant it, and it's there for a lifetime. Your father planted it, your grandfather planted it. It's there for a lifetime. You fertilize it once in a year, and then it yields every month enough for you to live a very, very nice and happy life. So it makes us laid back, it makes us happy, not lotus eaters really, but it does. So is that also the reason why people say that we are fairly cynical people? We are not only cynical about others, we are self-deprecating. We mock everyone, we mock ourselves. Do you think that is true? And if so, why?
No, we have this habit of, making somebody superhuman when somebody achieves something great. I remember when I was a child, we used to pray to Gandhiji as though he is God. Gandhiji has repeatedly said that he has nothing, he is a but down-to-earth man. But why do you consider Gandhi to be an avatar? Because you cannot accomplish that. You cannot reach that level of perfection. So we think he is God. Then we have no responsibility to rise to his level. So you exclude him. So many times we do that. We create these gods and goddesses, living gods and goddesses of human beings, basically because we want to separate ourselves or make that effort to either emulate them or try to be like them. And instead we say, oh, we are ordinary mortals, but these are gods. So in the whole attitude about Keralites in Kerala, I see that this kind of escapism is also part of this God's own country name, whether you agree or not. Anyway, so, but let me say something. The other thing
Then we are one of the most developed states that we want.
Sorry, there's some
Please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Voice is breaking. I hope my voice is not breaking because I'm speaking so much. The other thing is that my 40 years abroad, I dealt with, okay?
Yeah, you're okay. We can hear you.
Okay. So in my life abroad, I met a lot of Malayalis, a lot of Keralites everywhere, whether it is United States or Europe or Kenya. As you know, Keralites are everywhere. And I got accustomed to a kind of Keralite, which is globalized, very sophisticated, highly educated, and very systematic, very disciplined, the kind of people that I met. But when I came back here, I found that this is not the real Keralite. We seem to transform ourselves into something else when we are out of Kerala. So I asked this question as to how this happened, why this difference. Then I heard a story, I don't know if you know that, I'll put it very briefly. When God created the earth, He created Kerala as the best part of it. And also He created people for various states. So people in the other states, when they saw Kerala, they were astonished. What a beautiful country that you have created. So they went on a deputation to God and said, you have been very unfair, that you have given us all these dry zones and, no rivers and no greens, nothing. And how come that you have been so generous and so discriminatory? And then He said, wait till you see Malayalis. So then He created these people. Then the others were very happy because they were indisciplined, they were drinking.
So, Dr. Sreenivasan, would you make a distinction?
On?
Would you make a distinction then between Kerala and the Malayali?
Oh, no, I don't.
Kerala and the Malayali.
I'm using it as a general both ways. I mean, when you speak in English, it is easier to say Keralites rather than Malayalis. I don't mean that. But so the story goes like this.
We are supposed to be the most literate people in the world.
Yes. Well, that again is, I'm going to question that a little later.
We are supposed to be the most literate.
Yeah, well, statistics we have to see. We have to see statistics. But let me complete the story. So then it became the turn of the Keralites to go and complain to God. So they went to God and said, why have you done this? You have given us a beautiful country, but why have you made us like this? So God said, okay, I'll give you a boon. That is, those of you who take a flight from Nedumbassery and go abroad, then you will transform yourself into perfect beings. This is the story. This is very flattering to overseas Keralites. so some transformation like that takes place. That is why you find that Keralites who are at a concert in Kerala will not be so, law-abiding and careful and well-dressed and so on when you go to a Yeshudas concert. But you go to the same Yeshudas concert in New York, they are all dressed up properly, nobody makes any noise, they're very gentle, etc., etc. So this kind of a change, it might be because of the professions, because the way they live, it may be because of the situation in the country, etc., etc. But there is a difference between Keralites in Kerala, of course there are exceptions on both sides, and people whom I met in the last 40 years in other parts of the world. So how does this happen in real life?
Let me ask you a question then. Before that, a comment. May I ask you a question?
Sure, sure.
And before I ask you a question, a comment. In spite of all this, Kerala is one of the best states in India. We are, proudly so. That's one part. But the question I'm asking you personally is, you were born here, you were brought up here, and then you went abroad, and then you came back. So does this apply to you as well? That when you come back to Kerala, you are a different person, but when you go out, you are a completely different person?
I don't know that I cannot make a judgment because I cannot say because I haven't. I think I don't know. But that judgment has to be made by others after you hear the story. No, so what I meant to say was then I started looking at these things. For example, look at the way we greet people. Strangely, maybe because of the language, we really do not have a Kerala way of greeting people. Most of the time we say good morning, or we may say namaste, or we may say something, but nothing that is, see, I have lived in a country like Japan, where your social life is regulated by the language you use. You know, there is a set expression for everything. When I meet a person, when you walk into a shop, every salesman in that shop will shout, "Irashaimase," welcome to our shop. And it is no difference. Any part of Japan you go, you will say that. Or when you will sit at a meal, the hostess will come and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry I have not cooked anything today, but we have some leftovers, please try." That's what she will say. It is meant to be said like that. So it's like that there are patterns of behavior, patterns of greeting, patterns of established customs that you don't see very much in Kerala. Because like, for example, when you see somebody, what do you say? You may not necessarily say namaste. You may say, "Where are you going?" Right? And then he'll say, "Oh, I'm just going," or some such thing. So there is no formal kind of a linguistic usage. How many of us say thank you in Malayalam? Have you ever heard of the word Nandi anywhere? If you say Nandi, every Malayali will stare at you. What is he talking about? Where has he come from? So why is it that the language has not adapted
Very
itself
true,
to
very true, Ambassador Sreenivasan. I have tried to say Nandi many times, and sometimes because people don't respond, people think it's very strange. I don't. Then I go to, I find it so difficult. And that applies to many other things as well. Have you noticed that no self-respecting Malayali will say, "Ivalende bharyana," she is my wife. They'll always say, "Ivalende wife-ana," or even "Ivalende better half-ana." She's my better half. There is this reluctance to say why, say bharya in Malayalam. Similarly, they'll never say, I mean, when I was young, they used to say it, "Did you have your food?" But today they will never say that. Today they will always say food. It's never bhakshanam, it's always food. So you're so right. I think is this because we are literate and perhaps we need to educate ourselves a little bit more?
Yeah, maybe, but even the older times, I don't know, even before the influx of English language, etc. But still, I think the language did not develop. Maybe we should develop a dictionary of greetings that other countries have, and that we don't have. But that's so. But the other thing is that we don't hesitate to comment on other people's physique, for example. You know, now, "Oh, you are looking very fair," or "How have you become so dark?" Or "Oh, but you probably don't take any exercise. You, you developed a paunch." And this is another aspect which I have noticed, because we don't find it delicate to talk about another person's physical features. And of course, it's not meant as any kind of criticism or any kind, but this is a habit that we have developed. So these are the kind of things that I was saying that would make an outsider see it as different and a little bit strange. Having been born here, for me, it is not strange. But what I see, these are things which we can improve. We can make it our culture more sophisticated by adopting some of these in our own lifestyle. But then let me some positive things before you think that I'm going to criticize the Keralites. The one great thing about the Keralite is we are all very individualistic. And we are able to perform best when you are doing something alone. But when it comes to a group behavior, then we suddenly transform. This is probably partly also because of the influence of politics. Because over politicization, which identifies every group as some kind of a gang or some kind of a group from which you have to either join or you have to keep out. And therefore, the society activities, the activities that we have to do collectively, we are not able to do because of this individual strength. And this I have seen in Japan, for example. An individual will not be as impressive as a Keralite or as an Indian. But when it comes to a group, or when it comes to the discipline of a group, then suddenly they become very productive. And this is one thing that I have noticed here also, because this is something which others will notice.
I'm going to interrupt you there a little bit, Ambassador, because I've got a nice comment, which is coming from somebody who styles himself as RPA. He says, speaking of God's own country, he says, it's not only Lord Parashurama, but also Vamana visited Kerala during Mahabali's time. That makes two. That makes two gods. And then Saint Thomas, the apostle of Christ, also is said to have. So we have two gods and an apostle. So it is. He says it's something which is extraordinary.
But I was going to mention the Mahabali story in another context. Of course, this is true that Vamana came and saved Kerala from the evils of an Asura king, isn't it? That is the concept, and therefore it became God's country again. But there is another story about Mahabali which we must think, because Mahabali is not simply that we are thinking of a world which never existed. And in a sense, we are actually creating that world for the sake of Mahabali, who is visiting you every year. Right? So that particular day when Mahabali is here, we all, in a sense, pretend that we were as prosperous and as happy as we were during his lifetime. And then the next day we forget it. That's what we do. And therefore, there is a certain amount of pretension in the Mahabali story, but also there is a certain amount of imagination. Because what we hear in Mahabali's song is the song of an ideal world. So in our imagination, we are saying that this is the kind of world that we should build. But then funnily in that story, in that ideal world, there is no mention of God. Devotion to God is not an ideal which is mentioned there. So where does it go? How does it happen? Is that the reason why Vamana had to come and push out this king, however great or just or otherwise? He did not have faith in God. So that is another question that the Mahabali story raises. Are you okay? You seem to be working.
I've got another comment coming in from Narendranath Bhavaraj.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. There's a comment coming in from Narendranath Bhavaraj. He says, the lack of a formal greeting, is it representative of an innate shared value? Or is it a lack of warmth? Or is it both? That's his question. And speaking of, lacking a formal greeting, which is very true, but my own view is that lack of greeting is very well replaced by the smile we give. When a Westerner, for example, says thank you, his face is impassive. I mean, I'm not blaming anyone. But even if we don't say a thank you, a smile on our face represents a million thanks. So that comment from Narendranath therefore is I think, very, very pertinent. And how would you like to respond to that?
Well, the mask has now covered the smile. So now we have a problem if we were depending on smile. But I don't think many Malayalis smile like that. I have noticed. They do a bit of a smile, but I don't think I would consider it as adequate. I'm comparing it with other cultures and other experiences. These are not value judgments, I must say that. These are just observations, and there might be good reason for that one way or the other. And the other thing is, Keralites are considered to be very adaptable abroad. Everywhere that we have, we don't mix very much. We are kind of isolationist in a certain ways, because we tend to have our own groups, our own conversations, etc. And particularly so in India, because when we are in India, if you find somebody from the north or somebody from outside Kerala, we suddenly think in terms of a foreigner, not in terms of a fellow Indian. And that is something which I have noticed. And I find that many officers who work in Kerala, you know, civil service officers, etc., find themselves uncomfortable in the society most often, because they go into a group and then they'll find that we will greet them, say a few words in English, and then we go back, withdraw into your own shell and start speaking to each other in Malayalam. Have you noticed this habit? Is it because of lack of topic?
Everybody else, isn't it?
Everybody else?
It's true of every group. Yes, I suppose so. When a German comes into a group of Malayalis, we go out of the way to make the person comfortable, and yet the person may feel uncomfortable.
No, but we don't go out
of the way.
But we don't go out of the way to be friendly to a person. You will say hello to him and then leave him alone, because you think that you have other more interesting subjects to talk to your friends. But this does not happen outside, because you are in a minority and therefore you are often compelled to, be friendly with other people. But still we are very insular. And that is why we have so many Kerala associations and so many get-togethers among ourselves, while we do not try to cultivate the local people. One of the things I tell our Kerala leaders abroad is that you must invest in this country, that you should contribute to local politicians, make friendship with politicians, because your life in the future and your children lie here. And therefore, there is no point in inviting all the ministers from Kerala, bring them here and celebrate your Onam, rather than introduce Onam to your people and make them understand your culture and try to invest in them. And this other Indian citizens abroad do that. There is always they cultivate the politicians, and they become part of their system, make contributions to them, and generally try and make sure that you make use of the politicians in lobbying and other things. And that is what we seem to be lacking. And that is another habit that we have, which we carry into Kerala.
With your permission, can I move on? Let me move on to the way we dress. We are so well dressed in the sense that the white and white of our dhoti and our white shirt, the white mundu with a puli lakkada with a zari border, that's exquisite, isn't it? So we have a dress sense which is exquisite across the world. And when I say that, I also would like to point out that I did my schooling and I did my first 2 years of college in Chennai. I was in, and then I came and joined the Sacred Heart College here many years ago. And when what struck me was everybody wearing, all the students, everyone wearing pure white dhotis and white shirts. I was the only one wearing a pant. I stood out. They called me a Saikwa, foreigner. But today, if I go to the same Sacred Heart College, wearing a dhoti, and I'm wearing one now, I'll be about the only one who will be wearing a dhoti. Everybody else would be wearing a pant and a shirt. So that's contrast in our dressing. We are giving up something which has been very good to us. The white and white dhoti, whether it's a man or a woman. What do you think about these changes in our dress sense?
Well, when I recently wrote about Trivandrum, you may have noticed that one thing I said was, after having lived in -40 degrees and +40 degrees, I find Kerala very comfortable, average temperatures. And you don't have to change your clothes depending on the weather. Throughout the year, you can live with a dhoti and a shirt. And even if you change into a trouser, we do not have to change the texture. You don't have to invest too much in too many clothes and styles of clothes, and you don't need woolens, and these are all very comfortable. So on clothing, I think Kerala is very comfortable, and they have not gone for, of course, in the old days, we see people with a munda and an overcoat over it, the more sophisticated people. But all that has gone. A simple white shirt and white dhoti has become very acceptable, and it is very graceful, I think. And I have no particular observation on that. Actually, you should always dress for the weather that you are in. That once when I used to appear with a suit in the on television programs, I changed it because I thought that I should reflect the weather conditions within which you live rather than something else. So that, I think, is a good thing. I mean, none of these I'm saying is bad, but this kind of thing. The other thing I wanted to point out was our hesitation or to make changes in various things. Education is an obvious example, because we tend to go back and back. Now we have online education come because we were thrown into the water and we have to swim. But when we had a choice, we did not accept that. We did not accept the so many changes that people were recommending. As a result of that, what happens is the majority of people in Kerala remain in the old system, the old college system, the old syllabus, etc. While the richer and the more fortunate ones are able to go out of Kerala, out of India, and so on. So, and that is a general feature, I think, of our trying to remain within our own system, which we feel is adequate enough. But the challenges of the world, even after you see that many of them live abroad, the challenges of the world, we are not willing to accept that. And that change is getting very slow in Kerala. You agree with that?
To a large extent, yes. I would also rate all this to be part of a universal human behavior, not very exclusive to Kerala, but I'm not going to get into a debate on that. I'm going to move on. I'm not going to ask you, sir, whether you drink, whether you enjoy your scotch on the rocks, or like James Bond, whether you like your martini shaken or stirred. I'm not going to ask you that. But drink. Sorry, yeah, but Kerala has a drinking habit. It's not so much that people drink, which is everybody drinks across the world. It's also perhaps that at least a certain section, the drink goes overboard. Is that something you find something that when you come back after many years? My grandfather, for example, was somebody who would not permit anybody who was known to have drunk in his life anywhere within our compound. That was the sort of Kerala we lived in. But today it's very difficult to find somebody who doesn't drink. So what is your take on that? What do you think has changed?
On drinking,
and how do we change? I mean, not that I'm a...
No, on drinking, what I found out was more people drink than we think. Because we think that it is some kind of an evil and therefore should be hidden. You go to a party and you are living in the living room, somebody will come and offer you orange juice and soda, etc. And then the host will come and say, shall we go upstairs? Or something like that. When you go upstairs, there are 100 people sitting and drinking there. So it is still not an accepted norm, particularly in homes. It is considered to be some kind of an evil we should avoid, or at least we should not let others know. But the amount of drinking that is going on in Kerala and making it a necessary element of our social life and our economy is something astonishing, which surprised me a lot. This I had not seen when I was here 40 years ago. Maybe people were drinking, there were toddy shops and so on, but the kind of foreign liquor shops. Sorry?
But people drink all over the world. They drink in diplomatic circles. You've been in the UN. People drink there. People drink
But the average
of the diplomats as an ambassador with others. So it is.
No, I'm not talking against drinking. On an average, a Keralite seems to drink more alcohol than anywhere else in the world. You know, on Onam day, we would probably sell how much? 50 crores worth of alcohol. So, but this is not visible. This is not visible because it is still considered some kind of an evil, not as a social grace. And that's what I mean. And also people argue that if somebody did not drink and contribute to the excise department, the government will not be able to function effectively because they won't have the resources. So if you earn 1,000 rupees, 400 rupees should go to the bar, And then only the government will be able to give rice in the ration shops. And that kind of a linkage has happened. So what is the way out of this? Because many governments have tried to introduce certain restraints, etc., but it doesn't work. So it has become a national habit for us. I'm not saying whether it is good or bad, but that is something which has come to be accepted as an evil which must be allowed to continue.
I've got a question from MD Varghese, who's from the Productivity Council. This is again back to the question of of God's own country. He says the myth behind the Mahabali and Onam tells us that Vamana, a god by himself, who came in the guise of a dwarf, cheated the Asura king and sent him to Patalam, the netherworld. Is it a contradictory depiction of the Vishnu avatar, he asks?
Well, it is not, because he was challenging the gods. And therefore, however good a king may be, but when he challenged the gods, then they take vengeance. God himself comes to deal with that issue. And therefore, I don't see a contradiction here. Anyway, just to complete the story about drinking,
Can I move on?
I think in other systems, this is much more liberal, if at all, and much more limited, and so on. And the other thing is the linkage between politics and religion. This is something which is very striking when you come back to Kerala, because the religions have become some kind of unofficial political parties in Kerala. This I have not seen anywhere else. There may be some people belonging to a particular religion may be inclined towards socialism, another may be inclined towards capitalism, etc., etc. But here the organized groups of religious groups becoming the political force in the country. But of course, now it is all over India. But in Kerala is where we started it, because a politician has to go to religious groups and get their support and approval in order to be successful. And that is one other thing that I noticed. And since we are running out of time, perhaps I also had a...
Yeah, Manoj.
Yes.
There's Dr. Manoj Varghese who's asking a question on that. He says work ethics of Keralites when they are in Kerala and when outside seem to be very different. That is what you already said. Do you agree is this question? Your thoughts and experience on the same will be great to know. I think in a sense you may have answered that, but if you would like to answer it once again.
No, that's an unfortunate thing. When you develop a different kind of work habit elsewhere, when you come back, don't change it. You know, continue with it. That's what we don't do. When you come back, you fall into our own various ways. Anyway, coming to media. When I was here and then when I went to the United States for the first time, what struck me most was the freedom of the media. You know, at that time there was only one black and white channel or radio. Most of them were government owned. So therefore we had this feeling that, you know, this media is something which is very controlled and disciplined and so on. But when I went to the United States and also some other countries, I found there was massive criticism of the government in the media. And that was astonishing at that time. But now what has happened is we have gone beyond all those standards of criticism of politicians or criticism of the government. And it has become much more aggressive than before and beyond being creative. And therefore, every day that you have to create, of course, all this is very good for social criticism. Media is the one which brings out the social evils. But it has gone beyond what you see in a free country. And this is something which struck me here, because what I thought would not happen in India had already happened. And media became very aggressive and very influential in making changes. So, and Kerala has a special, I think Malayalis have a special penchant for news and cartoons and social criticism, etc. And that has come out very vividly. And therefore, apart from the film industry, the media itself, even the news media and the newspapers are very different from what you see in other parts of the world. But still we have a faith in the printed word. Whatever you may say on television, next morning you want to see it in Manorama or Madhubhumi. Then only you trust it. And that also is another habit that we have developed. Because we are not replacing the printed word.
Do you think, Ambassador, do you think that the media these days is exaggerating the weaknesses that we have, magnifying it while demagnifying our strengths? We seem to be demagnifying our strengths everywhere while magnifying our weaknesses. Why is that happening? Why are we so negative about ourselves?
Because that is what sells.
There's also a question for Narendra Nath, which I will read out also.
No, what sells is bad news.
Okay,
not
that's what
news.
sells, yeah. Is that because...
Exactly. So, you know, I used to complain to our...
There is a comment from Narendra Nath.
Yes?
Please go ahead, sir.
No, what I was saying was that the bad news is the news. Now, let us say, for example, after the pandemic came, there's a transformation in the media because they know that people are at home most of the time and they're all hungry for news. So the number of news items that come onto television has multiplied immensely. A 3-year news program, the anchor himself comes and stands there for 3 hours and create news, mostly controversial ones. So that is something which has happened very recently because there is less analysis, less care about the accuracy. There are, you know, news items for fake news. So all these, but I was told when there was an American journalist here and who was observing and studying Indian news media, he said, what you are doing today is what we used to do in the 60s, where the journalists were very aggressive and very critical of the government, and they thought that would help the administration and the governance. But now they have realized that doesn't do that.
So there's hope for us.
Sarah? So whether it is
hope for us.
social reform that we are bringing about or an encouragement to create bad news is what we are doing is something that we have to think about.
Thank you. Let me read out a comment again from Narendra Nath. He says, TPS was candid enough to point out some attitudinal glitches in the Malayali and the Kerala. Lack of teamwork, cynicism, change awards, etc. He says he always felt that Kerala needs a strong HR ministry, human resource ministry, to address these behavioral traits. Would you support such a thought? Do you want one more arm of the government, HR ministry, to help us to change our...
I didn't catch the question.
Cynicism, or he's wondering whether Kerala needs a strong HR ministry to address the behavioral traits that we have, these negative behavioral traits. Is that something?
The voice channel is breaking so much that I can't make
out. What can you hear me now?
Somebody is asking, how can you integrate expatriate talents?
Can you hear me? Wonderful. If you can answer that question, that'd be good enough. We'll move on then. Sorry?
No, you have become still yourself, and I can't hear. You are not moving. You are completely still on the...
Will you? Okay. Can you see me now?
Yes, I can see you. Yeah.
Can you
now
see
you
me
are moving. Otherwise, you are still. Yeah. Now I can see you. Now I can see you, but your lips are not moving.
Now the question from Narendra Nath was the question from Narendra Nath was, should we have an HR ministry in the state that will address the negatives that we have, the negatives of cynicism, not being able to work here, the lack of a work culture, etc. The negativity that we think we have. Do you think HR ministry will help change that?
Well, we're now coming to contemporary history. The education plan, the new education plan will certainly try to address some of these. They do talk about insularity as a problem in education in India. And having dealt with education for a short while, I know how insular we are. We do not interact the way in which we ought to know. And on even on national issues, for example, there is not enough appreciation. I remember when I was in the United States at a Kerala, a big function of Keralites, our ambassador in Washington, Mr. Siddharth Shankar Ray, decided to address them on the Kashmir issue, right? And he's a lawyer, and he came out with all these documents and told them all about this. And the majority of the audience was so surprised that there was such an issue, you know. And they all asked me, "Oh, is it such a problem? And why?" You know, a Malayali might say, "Why not just give away Kashmir and be done with it?" You know, that kind of an approach sometimes we have. We don't. I'm not talking about the intelligentsia, but if you talk to somebody, they don't care about what is happening somewhere in the north. We have this feeling that, oh, that is somewhere else, and here we have, you know, even in politics, we sometimes behave like that. We don't stay in line with the trend in the whole country. And that, of course, is ideological maybe, but that make us stand out in the country as a whole. And that, I think, is basically our insular approach and thinking of our issues rather than national issues. And that may be another thing which we might have to address and think about.
There are two questions coming in, if I can quickly read that out. This
Sure.
is from Tom Aditya from UK. He says, how can Kerala incorporate expatriate talents for Kerala's progress and development? One. And secondly, there's a question again from RPK, which is Roy, speaking from Dallas. He says the Onam Pookalam has Trikakara Appan symbolized by three pyramids, pyramid-like structures. Yeah. Does that have any cultural or religious connection to the pyramids of Giza in Kerala?
Okay. Yeah, the two are entirely different things. First, about expatriates wanting to help. I know many expatriates who have come to India to help. But unfortunately, what happens is they are not able to bring their plans into the system here. They come for a few days, they give some ideas to the government, they go back, and they are studied here, and people will say this is impractical, etc., etc. And therefore, this has not happened. Rajiv Gandhi did it very successfully. You know that how many expatriates he brought to India. Sam Pitroda is a famous example of an expatriate coming and transforming India to an extent. And that is possible. But even a simple waste management, we are not able to use our expatriate brain. The best waste management system in Singapore is run by a Malayali. But we don't have a waste management system to talk about in Kerala. Why is it that? So that is because we do not accept those external notions, and they do not have the time to concentrate more. I opened a scheme by which I said, professors of universities who come here on holiday, please let me know that we will arrange lectures. Everybody said yes, yes, yes. But when they came here, they had to go and run and see his uncle or go somewhere else. They never had the time. So there are some people who consciously try to build. When our ministers go abroad, there are lots of Malayalis who will speak about the need for them to be integrated with the development in Kerala. And everybody says yes, yes. But I have not seen any kind of welcome to them or from their side, the willingness to carry on substantially in the country. Talking of course, the Trikakara mold, the model, I think that is bringing in a certain element of religion into Onam. You don't need them, but that has been brought in because some people felt that you need some kind of a religious symbol, and that is how I think it has come about. But that is not an essential aspect. Certain parts of Kerala, we use that. But in Trivandrum, I never see them. And this year I was told that millions of them were made, Trikakarappans were made, and nobody was there to buy because nobody was putting pookalams at all. And therefore, it is not an essential aspect of Onam, but always you add more things to it. And sometimes that diverts from the main thing.
Is there any link to Egypt and the pyramids there? Because I remember one of my colleagues in the service, IAS, his name is Mishra. He was telling me the Mishras from Odisha came from Egypt. Mishra. Mishra is the name, Hindi term for Egypt. So he connects that and says this would have come from Egypt. And now here Is Roy from Dallas saying that the Tukakarappans could be some link to Egypt? Do you think there's a possibility of a link between us and Egypt?
I didn't hear. I couldn't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now I can hear you.
Sorry? I see.
Now I can hear you. Now I can.
Is there a link between the pyramids of Egypt and Kerala? Is there a link between Kerala and Egypt?
No, I have not noticed it. I've seen both Kerala and Egypt, but I haven't noticed any. There's a certain amount of chaos in Egypt, which finds very familiar for a Malayali. But other than that, I didn't notice any particular significance. So one last issue, maybe I think we are running out of time, is the, sorry?
But can I ask you an issue before you move to your last? Can I ask you about a last issue before you move to your last issue? It's about suicides. Kerala has a very high rate of suicides. Why is that happening? Young people are killing themselves. Why is that happening?
But you can't see me anymore, I suppose, because there is no power.
Oh, there's no power. We can hear you.
Yeah, I see. Okay, then we can continue.
That's good enough.
Because I can't see. Everything is dark here.
Yeah. Right.
So I might have to go and look up here.
That's okay, but you can hear me, can't you?
Yeah.
You can hear me.
Yes. So the question was, sorry, once again?
Two questions now. Why are there so many power failures in Kerala? The first question I asked was, why are there so many suicides in Kerala? But I'm adding a supplementary to it. Why are there so many power failures in Kerala?
Yeah, well, that is because we don't produce our own electricity enough.
Can you hear me?
Kudankulam was offered to us, but we did not take it because we didn't want nuclear energy in Kerala. So that's again is something very strange for a modern state, people who are interested in nuclear power. But we said no, not. But Kudankulam is not very far. If there is an accident, I think it is going to affect us anyway. So it was a decision. But increase in crime is something that is, I think, because of the social changes. I think the Gulf, phenomenon of people going away from the country, from Kerala, is maybe one of the factors which created so much social chaos in the state, which may be reflected in the crime situation. I'm afraid we have to finish.
Thank you very much. I think that part is not coming. Yeah,
but I think we have covered most of it.
You have any last words for us? Thank you so much. Any last words which you could, you would like to tell us with your vast experience within and outside Kerala?
The light has come. No, the one point only I wanted to make
your light has come back.
Was I'm speaking more as an insider than as an outsider. People not misunderstand that here is somebody who has come here and is criticizing us. That is not the intention. The intention was simply to identify some of the things that somebody who has lived abroad will notice and which need some kind of adjustment, some kind of clarity, I'm not saying that one conversation like this will change it, but the more that we become more and more self-critical and more notice these things. Some of these things we don't notice because we don't know what is elsewhere. And therefore, and with so many of us going abroad and coming back and so on, and some kind of effort should be made to bring about this. The last point I want to say was this mystery about every 5 years we changing government. This is a very unusual thing in any part of the world. See, because people are ideologically oriented one way or the other. And very few people shift. Or what exactly is this phenomenon? In America, you are a Republican for your life, small changes here and there, Democrats like that, but it is the swing states which determine the future of the presidency, etc., etc. But in our case, it's a massive shift. So does it mean that we do not believe in ideologies? Or is it that we are just being practical and we hope that the next government will be better than the past? This is a mystery because information is the same all the time. And the governments are more or less the same. Corruption is there, nepotism is there, all is there. But after 5 years, you completely shift the government. And this has not been broken so far. And that is another phenomenon that I have noticed. But just for the sake of noticing it, that's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
think we have covered
Yes.
this 1 hour. I mean, you've got this wide experience, your wide knowledge. And I think even though you wanted to speak about the Kerala you do not know, you've enlightened us with so much of knowledge about Kerala, about why are things like this in Kerala. But let me tell you, I mean, the last word is obviously mine. I suppose that in spite of all the negativity that we see in ourselves, we are, I believe, some of the best people in the world. We are, we have transformed Kerala in the last 30, 40, 50 years, unimaginably. So there must be a lot of good in what we are doing. And in spite, and it is our persistent effort to improve upon ourselves that makes us think that things are not good enough. I think that is what the case is. It is not only, it is not that there are things that are bad with us, but it's just our feeling that this is not adequate enough. We should do much more. Let me close here because I think the light has gone again from your room. So I'll hand over the floor to Mohit. It's come back. I'll hand over the phone to Mohit and Aditi. Mohit, would you like to say a last few words and thank? But before I leave again, thank you so much, Ambassador Sreenivasan. It's a pleasure talking to you. Mohit, would you like to take over?
Thank you very much, sir. But the similar situation in Delhi today, it was heavy rains. My network is also not working well. I would request Aditi to please do the honors, give a vote of thanks to Ambassador Mr. Sreenivasan and to you, sir. What a brilliant session it was. Aditi, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, so it's left to me to say the thank yous. It looks like my power today hasn't failed, not like the first session. And power cuts here are really rare. I think we actually, from the time I was small to now, when I see my children, the very first time they experienced a power cut in Tamil Nadu was because in Gudalur where the wires and all broke because of the storm. So that was the first time they actually experienced lights out, So it is a different world. And I agree with many of the points that you have raised today, sir. I think as an outside, as in Kerala and growing up in Kerala, I get both sides of the picture. And I'm many times party to both sides of the, the actions that you are describing. So I can fully identify with the whole thing. Having said that, though, I'm seeing so much exciting stuff even in the education side of it, but maybe that's another conversation for another day. I think it was really interesting, today's session. And I'd like to thank you both from the bottom of my heart, and City Book leaders for putting this together and coming on live today with us. Have a great weekend, everyone. Yes, sir.
Let me add something which I forgot.
Yeah.
The next session, the fourth session of All That's Kerala will be with the young author, Anu S. Pillai, who wrote about the Travancore Kingdom. His very, very famous book, 500 pages plus. The Ivory Throne is something that everybody knows. Manu S. Pillai will talk to us about the kingdoms that made Kerala on Saturday, the 19th September, at the same time, 7:30. Manu is a very interesting young person. He's about 35, but he has so much knowledge about the kings and the kingdoms and the culture of Kerala, the history of Kerala. And he'll especially speak on the Sri Padmanabha Swami temple and all the wealth there. So I just wanted to request you to join in on the 19th of September, Saturday at 7:30 for the fourth episode of All That's Kerala, Kingdoms That Made Kerala. Manu S. Pillai will be our guest. Yes, Aditi, please take over.
I think I was done almost with everything. I think just to say a big thank you to Citibook leaders and to you, sir, for envisioning this whole series and starting this off to many more excellent sessions like this.
Thank you very much, Aditi. Thank you very much, Mohit. And most of all, a thank you to all our participants.
Viewers, yeah.
Especially to Dr. Sreenivasan. It's been an enchanting session. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.